Nobody knew how long she had been lying there, covered in dirt, wrapped in rags, looking less like a living soul and more like something unearthed from a forgotten grave. Daniel Cross almost rode past her that day. He wasn't the kind of man who went searching for ghosts, and in a land like Rustwater, ghosts were everywhere. He almost didn't stop, and if he hadn't, Clara Hale would have been nothing more than a whisper carried away by the desert wind. But life has a cruel way of circling back. Daniel had already lost everything he once prayed for: his wife, his boy, his reason to keep breathing. After that, he told himself he'd never get tangled in someone else's ruin. Yet there she was, collapsed by the dried-up creek bed, and something deep inside him wouldn't let him turn away. The sun beat mercilessly over the cracked earth. Heat shimmered against the canyon walls, and the horizon bent like a mirage. Clara's face was streaked with dust, her dress torn, her lips cracked from thirst. Daniel dismounted, his boots crunching against the brittle ground, and knelt beside her. From his saddlebag, he pulled out a dented flask and tilted it gently to her lips. She drank with trembling hands, the water spilling down her chin, but her eyes, those desperate eyes, fixed on him like he was her last tether to this world. "You'll be all right," Daniel muttered, though he wasn't sure if it was a promise or a prayer. Clara tried to speak, but her voice broke into a dry rasp. They left me." Daniel didn't ask who. He already knew. The frontier had a way of abandoning the weak, and Rustwater was no exception. He lifted her carefully, her frail frame light against his weathered arms, and laid her across his horse. The long ride back to town was silent, save for the creak of leather and the haunting cries of distant coyotes. Rustwater was no place for the faint-hearted. A dust-choked settlement on the edge of nowhere, it was held together by saloons, gun smoke, and fragile deals made in the dark. Folks kept to themselves, and survival came before kindness. As Daniel rode into town with Clara slumped in his saddle, eyes followed. Some curious, some suspicious, most indifferent. He carried her into the only doctor's shack the town had, a leaning wooden building smelling of whiskey and herbs. Old Doc Wilkins glanced up, his hands stained from years of patching bullet holes and snake bites. "Another stray?" the doctor muttered, but his hands were already moving, fetching water and cloth. Daniel stayed by her side. Hours passed before Clara's breathing steadied, before her eyes fluttered open again in the dim glow of lantern light. "Why'd you stop?" she whispered, her voice soft as ash. Daniel leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. "Guess I didn't want another ghost following me home." From that night, something unspoken tied them together. Rustwater was harsh, but Clara refused to let her spirit be crushed. She mended what she could, stitched her ragged dress, and walked with her chin lifted, though whispers trailed behind her everywhere she went. The town judged her, a woman left for dead, without family, without name. But Daniel saw something else. He saw fire beneath the ash. It didn't take long for trouble to find her. The Rustwater Saloon was where men went to bury their regrets in cheap whiskey. One night, Clara entered with her head held high, her torn dress freshly mended, her hair brushed back. Conversations stilled. Some men sneered, others smirked, and one, Elias Monroe, a rancher with too much money and not enough decency, stood from his corner table. "Look what crawled out of the desert," he drawled, his voice dripping with contempt. "Rustwater's charity case." Daniel was there, nursing a glass, his hat tipped low. He saw Clara stiffen, saw her knuckles tighten around the tray she carried. Monroe reached for her arm, but before his fingers could close, Daniel's hand slammed against the table. "Sit down, Monroe," Daniel said, his voice calm but edged like a blade. The saloon went silent. Monroe sneered, his pride wounded, but he knew better than to test Daniel Cross, the man who had nothing left to lose. With a mutter, he slumped back into his chair, though his eyes burned with quiet hatred. Clara exhaled slowly, setting down the tray. She didn't thank Daniel, didn't need to. Their eyes met, and that was enough. Weeks bled into months. Rustwater's dusty streets became the stage for a fragile rebirth. Clara found work helping the baker's wife, her laughter echoing faintly across the town square, though shadows of her past lingered. Daniel, once the quiet loner who spoke to no one, found himself drawn into her orbit, sharing words, sharing silences. But peace was never built to last in a place like Rustwater. Word spread of raids along the outskirts. Farmers robbed, wagons burned, riders left for dead. The culprits were men led by Monroe, though he kept his hands clean in town. The sheriff, too old and too cautious, looked the other way. Folks muttered about justice, but fear chained their tongues. One night, Samuel Dwyer, an old friend of Daniel's, knocked at his door. "They'll come for her," Samuel warned, eyes heavy. "Monroe doesn't forget being shamed, and he sure as hell won't forgive." Daniel stared into the flames of his hearth. He had tried to build walls, to keep from caring, to live in the hollow shell grief had carved. But Clara had slipped past those walls, and now there was no turning back. The storm broke on a dusky evening. Riders thundered into Rustwater, dust clouds rising like smoke. At their front was Monroe, grinning with cruelty. "Bring her out," he shouted, his voice echoing off wooden facades, "or we burn this town to the ground." Fear rippled through Rustwater's streets. Windows slammed shut, doors locked, but Clara stepped forward, her eyes steady. "I won't run," she whispered. Daniel strapped on the revolver he had sworn never to touch again. His fingers curled around the worn grip, the weight both foreign and familiar. He stepped beside Clara, meeting Monroe's gaze across the distance. "This town's had enough of you," Daniel called. Monroe laughed, spurring his horse closer. "And who's gonna stop me? You? A broken man clinging to a half-dead stray?" But he underestimated what desperation forged in a man's soul. The standoff was short, brutal. Guns roared, fire lit the night, and when the dust cleared, Monroe lay broken in the dirt, his men scattered like jackals. Rustwater stood silent, then slowly, life seeped back into its veins. Farmers emerged, children ran laughing, and for the first time in years, hope dared to take root. Daniel lowered his gun, breathing hard. Clara touched his arm, her eyes shining not with fear, but with something brighter, something he thought he'd buried forever. "You're not alone anymore," she said. And for the first time in a long, long while, Daniel believed it. From that day, Rustwater wasn't just another forgotten outpost on the edge of nowhere. It became a place where broken souls found new beginnings. Daniel Cross, once a man haunted by ghosts, found reason to keep walking. Clara Hale, once left for dead, stood tall with fire in her heart. Together, they rebuilt not just their own lives, but a town that had almost forgotten how to hope. And though the desert winds would always whisper of loss, Daniel knew one thing for certain. Some stories don't end in the dust. Some rise from it. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It keeps you right here with us, where stories of the Old West remind us not only of who we were, but who we can still choose to be. Because in the end, the West was never just about land and guns. It was about PE people. How broken and brave. Broken